The sun blistered the earth like a curse, and the wind dragged dust devils across the canyons, whispering the stories of the dead. Nalinah crouched low behind a weather-worn boulder, her breath quiet, shallow. Far off, horses snorted, 3 of them, maybe 4, riders too loud, too confident. Mercenaries. She could tell by their movements they weren't used to this land. They moved like intruders, and the desert had little patience for the clumsy. She shifted her weight, ignoring the ache in her thighs. Her moccasins left barely a trace in the sand, and the rifle across her back lay quiet, as if it too knew the stakes. A hawk screamed high above, circling. She didn't look up. Her eyes stayed locked on the trail below, where the hunters pressed forward, slow and lazy. They thought she was tired, wounded, alone. They were right about one thing. She was alone, the last of her people, or close to it. Not that anyone kept count anymore. The Apache were either dead, hiding, or worse, silent. Silence was death. Silence meant forgetting. Nalinah hadn't forgotten. Not the ambush. Not the fire that ate her village. Not the sound of her father's last breath, crushed under the boot of a man with pale skin and a badge paid for by gold and whiskey. She remembered everything. That was her gift. And her curse. The bounty poster had her name scrawled wrong, but the sketch caught her eyes well enough. Angular. Sharp. As if someone had tried to make her look like a predator, not a person. Wanted dead or alive, but it might as well have said Apache. That was crime enough for the likes of them. She'd stolen water from a trading post 3 nights ago, just enough to survive. She left beads in return, handmade, polished by Riverstone. But the trader turned her in anyway. Word was out. $1,000 for her body. $2,000 if she came back breathing. Nalinah figured they liked to make a show of their executions these days. Called it justice. Called it civilized. A pebble shifted to her left. Her hand found the hunting knife at her hip, slow and sure. The breath in her chest became ice. Then she heard it, creaking leather. A boot slipping on shale. Too close. Nalinah spun, and in one fluid motion, yanked the man forward by his collar. He didn't even have time to cry out before the blade kissed his throat. She dragged him backward behind a rock. A twitch. A gurgle. Then stillness. She'd bought herself seconds. Nothing more. The other riders would hear the scuffle. They'd fan out. She couldn't outrun them, on foot, forever. She wiped the blade on the man's coat and took the revolver from his belt. 6 shots. Worn grip. Good weight. The wind shifted again, carrying with it the sharp smell of gun oil and sweat. One rider called out, "Benny, you see something?" Silence answered. Nalinah knew they'd come next with rifles raised and questions later. She gritted her teeth and sprinted up the canyon wall, boots slapping against stone. They'd spot her, but not before she had the high ground. Bullets tore past her. One struck the rock near her head, spitting stone. She dove behind an outcrop, fired once, twice. One rider fell. His horse screamed and bolted. The other 2 ducked for cover, shouting curses, one hollering something about that Apache witch. A 3rd shot clipped her shoulder. Pain like fire lanced through her arm, but she didn't stop. Another shot. Then a voice that didn't belong to the others boomed out over the chaos. "Drop your weapons." It echoed, sharp and final. Not a plea. A command. Then silence. A shot rang out, clean, deliberate. One of the bounty hunters dropped, his chest blooming red. The last man cursed and ran. His horse thundered away across the dry earth, too fast to follow. Nalinah lay flat, blood seeping into her shirt, breath heavy. Then footsteps. Measured. Heavy boots. Spurs that didn't jingle. She rolled to her good side and raised the revolver with a trembling hand. "You're bleedin' like a stuck pig," said the voice. A figure emerged, tall and broad-shouldered, outlined by the sun. He wore a wide-brimmed hat and a worn duster that brushed his boots. A rifle rested easy in his hands, like it belonged there. "You shoot me," she said, voice raw. "I'll take you with me." The man raised one eyebrow and stopped walking. "Well, that's one hell of a greeting. Who are you?" He crouched, slow, letting her see his hands. No badge. No iron star. Just calloused palms and a scar across the knuckles of his right hand. Name's Jack Mercer. I own a ranch 10 miles south of here. Saw smoke last night. Figured someone was either cooking or dying. His eyes studied her with a soldier's calculation. Looks like you were doing a bit of both. She didn't lower the gun. He sighed, and his voice softened just a notch. I ain't here for your bounty, if that's what you're a-skin. I know who you are, Nalinah. She flinched at the sound of her name on his tongue. He added, and I know what the Barons be done. My wife's people were Apache. I buried her 6 winters back. The words didn't change her stance. Not yet. But they cracked something. Jack saw it. His face stayed neutral, but his hand went to his pocket. He pulled something out. A beaded leather band, worn with age. My wife made this before the fever took her. Said it was to remind me that the earth has memory. He laid it on the rock between them. You're hurt. Let me help. She hesitated, then lowered the gun. Just a little. You want me to trust you? No, he said, I want you to survive. She passed out before she could argue. When she came to, she was in a shaded lean-to beneath a sloping red rock ledge. Her shoulder burned, but it was wrapped in fresh cloth. Her weapons were nearby, untouched. Jack was by the fire, boiling coffee and humming an old war tune under his breath. You'll live, he said without turning. You're lucky that bullet passed clean through, and that I used to patch up worse in Georgia. She sat up slowly. Her voice was dry. Why did you help me? He looked over his shoulder. For the first time, she saw the lines on his face, deep like riverbeds, carved by grief and years. Because sometimes, he said, a man sees someone running from the same kind of devil he once knew. And he figures, if he can't kill the devil, maybe he can give it one less soul to drag down. She said nothing, but for the first time in days, the weight in her chest didn't feel so crushing. He poured her a tin of coffee and offered it. She took it with her left hand. Her right arm would take time to heal. You've got about a day before someone else picks up your trail, he said. Baron's men won't stop. Not for a woman. Not for an Apache. Not for anyone. I know. Jack stared into the fire for a long moment. I got horses. A trail they won't expect. You ride with me. You might just make it out of this. She looked at him, eyes searching for the lie. He didn't blink. Finally, she nodded once. Then we ride, she said. He smiled faintly. That's what I figured. And behind them, the wind whispered once more, low and mournful, like the land remembering blood. Jack Mercer's ranch stood like a stubborn dream against the dying edge of the frontier. Nestled in a basin rimmed with red rock and brush-choked hills, it was the kind of place time seemed to ignore. The barns slouched with age, the fences leaned like drunks after a long night, and the well creaked whenever the wind got mean. But the horses were strong, the cows lean and tough, and the land gave just enough not to starve. Nalinah rode beside him in silence, her wounded shoulders stiff beneath the bandage, her eyes tracking every shadow. She hadn't spoken much since they left the canyon. Jack didn't press her. He knew the language of pain. Its grammar was in glances, its punctuation in silence. By late morning, they reached the edge of his property. A wooden sign, half buried by dust and vines, read Mercer Ranch, the paint faded but still defiant. Jack dismounted and pushed the gate open with a grunt. Nalinah followed, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the landscape. Don't look like much, he admitted, but the roof don't leak and the coffee's always hot. She didn't answer, but she didn't turn her horse around either. Inside the house, the air smelled of wood smoke and saddle oil. The walls were lined with books and maps, a rifle hanging above the hearth. Everything was neatly kept but worn, like its owner. Jack pointed her toward the only bed and began boiling water in a dented kettle. You can rest here. Safe for now. There's no such thing, she said. He glanced over. No, I reckon there ain't. She sat, not to relax, but to conserve energy. Her posture stayed alert. Hand never far from a knife she refused to remove. Jack stirred the pot and said nothing more until the stew was ready. They ate in silence. The fire crackled, and outside, coyotes began to howl. You said your wife was Apache, Nalinah finally said, voice low. He nodded without looking up. Her name was Taza. Met her during the war, up north. She saved me from a Union patrol after I got separated. Patched me up, then made me work for it. Said healing without debt was bad medicine. Nalinah studied him. And they let you marry her? He chuckled once, bitter and quiet. They let us. Town didn't. Folks spat on her, called her savage. Thought I was cursed. After she died, they stopped talking to me. Some folks you don't miss. She tilted her head. Then why stay? Jack looked into the fire, jaw tight. 'Cause leaving would have meant forgetting her. This land was the one place we built together. Even if it tries to bury me, I'll rot here happy. A long silence passed between them. Not uncomfortable, just honest. Then she asked, why help me? He looked at her then, truly looked. Because the people hunting you are the same men who called my wife a stain on my name. Because they burn what they can't buy. Because I'm tired of watching good things get swallowed by men with clean boots and filthy hands. Her gaze softened a fraction, but it hardened again when a distant pop cracked through the night. Gunfire. One shot. Then two more. They both stood at once, instinct kicking in like a shared memory. Jack grabbed his rifle from the wall, and Nalinah snatched a revolver. Outside, the horses bucked in their pen, hooves pounding. Jack scanned the darkness. A shape moved near the tree-line. Stay low, he said, already moving. Nalinah ignored him and slipped out the side, using the shadows like a second skin. She crept along the edge of the barn, her boots silent on the dirt. Jack took the front, boots heavy on the porch, a deliberate target. He raised his voice, flat and fearless. You got 2 seconds to turn back, or I feed you to the buzzards. A voice answered from the dark. Ain't no need for drama, mister. We just came to talk. The voice was oily, too smooth. Jack fired once, high and to the left. A branch exploded near the speaker's head. That's me bein' polite, he said. 3 shapes broke from cover and sprinted toward the barn. Nalinah took aim and shot the lead runner in the thigh. He collapsed, howling. Jack downed the second with a gut shot. The third turned and fled, his boots slapping panic into the dirt. Silence followed, sharp and sudden. Jack exhaled. Scouts. Not the main group. Nalinah emerged from the shadows, jaw tight. They're close. Maybe a day behind. He nodded. You're not wrong. She stepped over the wounded man, still moaning in the dirt. Jack pointed his rifle at the man's head. No, she said. Jack blinked. You want to keep him? I want to question him. Jack lowered the rifle. Fair. They tied the scout to a post and waited for dawn. When the sun cracked the horizon, painting the hills blood red, Nalinah crouched before the prisoner. Who sent you? She asked. The man spat blood and tried to grin. You already know. Tell me what you know, or I let him have you, she said, nodding to Jack. That made the man reconsider. Baron ain't stoppin'. He sent 5 more after us. Said he wants the witch alive this time. Wants to see her hang. Jack stepped forward. Where are they? Couple miles south. Waiting for the full moon. Gonna trap her near the Mesa Pass. Nalinah's eyes darkened. The pass leads to the old fort. The prisoner nodded. Yeah, that's where the Baron's boys headin'. Gonna make a show of it. Jack turned away, jaw clenched. Nalinah stood slowly. Kill him. She didn't watch it happen. They burned the body with the morning wind, silent save for the hiss of fire on flesh. As the flames died, Nalinah turned to Jack. He'll expect me to run east. But if we head for the fort first, cut across the arroyos, we'll beat them. Jack nodded, then paused. You sure there's someone at that fort who'll help? There was, she said. An elder. He taught me things. Healing. Tracking. If he's still alive, he'll know what to do. And if he's not? She looked west, where the sky bled orange. Then we end it there. Jack exhaled, slow. I'll get the horses. As he moved toward the barn, she looked down at the beaded band still wrapped around her wrist, his wife's band. Its colors had faded, but the pattern held. She tightened it once and followed him. The sun had risen fully now. No clouds. No shelter. Just the trail ahead and the men behind. But for the first time since she was a child, Nalinah didn't feel alone. The ghost still followed, but now someone else walked beside them. They rode out in silence, leaving the fire to die in their wake. And the wind chased them, howling like it wanted one last secret. The land grew crueler the farther west they rode. Gone were the soft sagebrush meadows and quiet cottonwoods. Now, the desert yawned wide and mean, dotted with jagged boulders like the bones of giants and cacti standing tall as sentinels. Jack and Nalinah rode with urgency, the horses slick with sweat, the air hot enough to sting the skin. But the danger wasn't the sun or the land. It was the silence. Silence meant the mercenaries were close. By midday, they reached the dry riverbed that twisted toward the Mesa Pass. Jack dismounted first, checking the ground. His fingers brushed the dust, then paused at an indentation. Fresh tracks. 6 horses. Heavy load. Moving fast. Nalinah crouched beside him, her eyes narrowing. Baron's men. Jack nodded. They're trying to get ahead of us. They know about the fort. She scanned the horizon. If they get there first, there's no one to help us. Jack rose, brushing off his hands. Then we don't let them. They moved at a dead run, pushing the horses harder than was wise. The wind kicked grit into their eyes. Jack's hat flew off once, and he didn't bother to turn back for it. Every minute counted now. The fort was 2 hours away, an abandoned outpost built when men still thought they could tame the West with stone and steel. It had once been a haven for Apache who dared to live between 2 worlds. Now it was dust and memory. As the first shadows stretched across the ground, they crested a ridge and froze. Smoke, dark and curling, it rose from the canyon floor near the fort. No, Nalinah whispered. They galloped the last half-mile, the horses snorting foam. The smell hit them before the sight did. Burned wood, scorched meat. The fort was gone. The walls had been torn down. What remained smoldered in ashes. Bones littered the dirt, animal, maybe human. A crude effigy had been hung from the charred gate, an Apache headdress nailed to a cross. Jack dismounted and turned away, face pale. Nalinah stood still, her eyes unreadable. She walked into the ruins without a word. The wind tugged at her hair, carrying the ash like snow. Near the main courtyard, she knelt beside something half-buried in soot. A medicine pouch, beaded, shaped like a hawk. She picked it up, brushed off the dirt, and tied it around her neck. He stayed to fight, she said softly. He didn't run. Jack stood beside her. Then he died on his feet. Nalinah's voice was distant. He taught me that death isn't what we fear. It's dying for nothing that haunts us. They were quiet for a long time. A gust stirred the ash and lifted it into the fading sky. Then, behind them, hoofbeats. Jack spun, rifle raised. 6 riders approached, slow and deliberate. One wore a red scarf, a smug grin under his mustache. Another carried a whip slung over one shoulder. And at the front, leading them like he owned the horizon, was the Baron's son. His face was pale, but the scar across his cheek twisted his smile into a permanent sneer. "Well now," he said, "ain't this poetic?" Jack stepped forward. "Turn around." The Baron's son laughed. "I'm not here to parley, old man." Nalinah's fingers closed around her revolver. The men spread out, forming a semicircle. "You remember me, don't you, girl?" the Baron's son said, voice thick with mockery. "You cost me this face. Thought you could hide behind your ghosts? Thought you could run forever." Nalinah didn't blink. "I hoped you'd die of shame." That brought silence. Then a chuckle. "She still bites," he said, glancing at his men. "But let's see if she bleeds." They moved fast, guns drawn. Jack dropped one with a chest shot. Nalinah hit another in the leg. The man with the whip cracked it once, missing by inches. Dust exploded. A bullet tore Jack's shoulder. He stumbled, cursed, rolled behind cover. Nalinah ducked into the wreckage of the chapel, the doorway crumbling behind her. She fired through a slit in the wall, striking the rider with the red scarf. His body tumbled from the saddle. Gunfire roared. Wood splintered. Smoke stung her eyes. Jack groaned from the other side of the courtyard. He was bleeding bad, pinned behind a low wall. She had to reach him, but the Baron's son had moved closer, circling her like a vulture, shooting only when he had to, savoring it. "You think he'll die for you," he called. "He'll bleed out in the dirt for nothing, just like the rest of your kind." Nalinah snapped. She stepped from the shadows and fired 3 times, fast and sharp. One grazed his thigh. He howled, stumbling. Another mercenary rushed her. She drove her knife into his gut, twisted, and dropped him without hesitation. She ran to Jack. He was pale, sweat pouring down his face. "You look like hell," he said through gritted teeth. She smiled grimly. "You've looked worse." Together, they crawled behind a collapsed wall. Jack fumbled with a flask, took a long swig, then passed it to her. "You go. I'll hold them off." She shook her head. "Not this time." Outside, the last 2 mercenaries regrouped. One lit a dynamite stick. Jack's eyes widened. "They're going to bring the whole place down." Nalinah looked at the cracked beams, the tinder-dry remains of the fort. If it caught fire again, they wouldn't make it out. Unless they ended it now. "Give me your rifle," she said. Jack handed it over, lips tight. She climbed to the top of the wreckage, exposed, visible. The dynamite man grinned and raised his arm to throw. Nalinah fired once. The explosion took him mid-motion. Only the Baron's son remained. He ran, but she followed, cornered him at the gate. He turned, a knife in hand. "You think killing me will change anything?" "No," she said. Then she shot him in the chest. As he fell, he smiled. "They'll just send more." She stepped over his body. "Let them." The fire caught behind her, crackling through the debris. She pulled Jack up, helped him onto a horse. Together, they rode out of the fort's final funeral. By the time they reached high ground, the sun was setting, painting the sky in fire and blood. They stopped beside a dead tree. Jack coughed once, then said, "You're good with that rifle. You're slow for a rancher." He laughed, weak but real. They sat there a while, not speaking. Below, the last light faded from the ruins. And above, the stars blinked awake, one by one. Dawn came slow, creeping over the red horizon like blood soaking into cloth. The desert had quieted in the night, as if even the wind was holding its breath. Jack and Nalinah moved without speaking, the weight of what they'd survived pressing down like a second saddle. They followed the ridgeline north, where the land narrowed into a choke point called Widow's Spine, a jagged cut of stone and sand known more for its body count than its beauty. They knew the Baron would send more men. They also knew he wouldn't come himself. Men like him never did. Jack's wound was bound tight, the bleeding stopped, but each step stole a bit more color from his face. He rode hunched, his grip on the reins slackening. Nalinah checked him often, her eyes sharp, jaw set. She'd offered to turn back, to hide in the hills, but Jack shook his head. "We finish it," he said, "or it finishes us." There was no argument in her after that. They reached Widow's Spine by mid-morning, a bottleneck of cliffs and switchbacks, perfect for an ambush or a stand. The high ground was rough, but Jack knew it better than most. He had grazed cattle through here during dry summers, carved out game trails with his own hands. And as they climbed, he pointed to blind corners, natural choke points, ledges a rifleman could use like a god. "Help me rig the dynamite," he said. Nalinah raised an eyebrow. "Where did you get dynamite?" Jack offered the faintest grin. "The perks of being a man nobody visits. Got a stash from old railroad days. Never thought I'd use it." They worked quickly, planting charges in the narrowest bends. Jack talked her through the wires, the fuses, the range. She listened with precision. They were 2 people stitched together by scars and necessity. No illusions, no promises, just a common fire that wouldn't go out. Once the traps were set, they waited. By mid-afternoon, the dust rose again in the south. Nalinah spotted them first, 8 riders. Fresh mounts, black coats, hired guns, professional and brutal. And among them, dressed in a fine gray coat and flanked by 2 guards, was a man she'd never seen in person but recognized from her nightmares. Baron Elias Harwood. He had come, after all. Not for justice, not for pride, For spectacle. Jack's lips parted in disbelief. That man's never left his estate in years. Nalinah's voice was ice. He thinks this will be easy. Harwood raised a hand, signaling the others to hold. His voice carried in the canyon, oily and smooth. Jack Mercer, you're harboring a fugitive. Step aside, and no harm will come to you. Jack shouted back, tone flat. You shot me 2 nights ago. That's past negotiating. Harwood chuckled. You're injured. You've got one woman beside you. Think about your odds, Mercer. I already did, Jack said. Then I lit the fuse. There was a pause. Then the canyon exploded. Flames and rock tore through the front line of riders, hurling 2 horses into the air like toys. The scream of beasts and men filled the ravine. Harwood's horse reared and threw him. He landed hard, scrambling behind a boulder as his guards opened fire wildly toward the cliffs. Nalinah was already moving, weaving between cover, rifle slung over her shoulder. She picked off a rider as he tried to climb out of the canyon. Another fell trying to circle left. Jack fired from above, blood running down his arm, each shot shaking through his bones. Then Harwood's men regrouped. 4 remained. They split up, trying to flank. Nalinah caught one climbing the south side and stabbed him with the same knife she'd used in the canyon days ago. It had gone from survival tool to vengeance blade, baptized in blood and ash. She dropped him without a sound. The battle turned savage. Bullets ricocheted off stone. Smoke clouded vision. A second rider shot Jack in the leg before Nalinah dropped him with a clean shot between the eyes. Jack fell back, panting, propped against the rock, whispering curses through gritted teeth. You holding on, she called. Barely, he groaned. You only need to outlast one more. She moved toward the center, silent as dusk, and found Harwood crouched behind a boulder, pistol shaking in his hand. He saw her and stood, slow and deliberate. You think this matters, he hissed. You kill me, and another will take my place. This land belongs to men like me. It used to, she said. You're nothing but a name on a dead language, he snapped. You're a story to frighten children. She stopped walking. No, she said. I'm the last sentence of your chapter. He raised his pistol. She fired first. The shot rang across the canyon, clean and final. Harwood dropped to his knees, eyes wide, mouth working but making no sound. Then he pitched forward, face in the dust. Nalinah exhaled. It wasn't relief. It wasn't triumph. It was survival. When she found Jack, he was still breathing, pale but conscious. His lips curled into a weak smile. Please tell me you got him. He's dead. Jack nodded slowly. Good. I hate unfinished business. She sat beside him, pulled out his flask, and poured half the contents over his leg. He hissed, but didn't curse. They waited there in the cooling light, leaning on each other, wordless. As night fell, the stars arrived one by one, blinking through the smoke. Eventually, Jack spoke. What now? Nalinah stared into the sky. Now we bury him. And then I go north. There's a settlement by the river. Apache and settlers both. They live quiet, hidden. Jack raised an eyebrow. You think they'll have you? They won't have a choice, she said. Then softer, but maybe they will. He was quiet a moment. I've got land, livestock, if you ever want. She looked at him, then really looked. I think you've done enough, she said. But her voice wasn't cold, just honest. He chuckled. Yeah, I probably have. The next morning, they buried Elias Harwood beneath the stone where he died. No marker, no words. The desert would take him back, and that was justice enough. Nalinah saddled her horse while Jack remained seated, too weak to stand. She tied the leather band tighter on her wrist and looked down at him. You'll live. He grinned. You sound disappointed. She mounted. Stay alive, Mercer. He tipped his hat, or tried to. Ride hard, Nalinah. She rode off without looking back. He watched her silhouette shrink into the dust, swallowed by the sun. When she vanished, he let out a long breath and leaned his head against the rock. In a land where justice rides on the back of a bullet, he murmured to himself, sometimes it takes a ghost to remind you what it means to be alive. The desert answered with silence. Then the screen fades to black. Narrator's voice returns. In the Old West, justice was measured in blood and grit. But sometimes it left behind something more. A whisper, a legend, a name carved not into wood or stone, but into the wind. That name was Nalinah, and this was her reckoning. Final text overlay. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Out here, every voice counts, and every tale keeps the West alive.